Okay, we're going to discuss tree diagrams. A tree diagram is a tool to help display all the outcomes of a probability experiment. For example, let's show the outcomes of flipping a coin once. So the act of flipping a coin is considered a probability experiment. And when you flip a coin once, you can get two outcomes. You could get a heads or you can get tails. This is a very basic tree diagram. We have the name of the experiment, which is flip a coin, and then we can branch out to the two possible outcomes, H for heads or T for tails. So two branches for each outcome. Then we list our outcomes in a column to the right of the tree diagram. H for heads, T for tails. Okay, this is a very, very basic tree diagram. But if we make it a little bit more complex, where we flip a coin twice, we flip the coin one time and we branch out to the two possibilities, heads or tails. If we flip it once and get heads, then we'll flip it twice and get two more possibilities, heads or tails. If on the first flip we got tails, then when we flip it the second time we can get two other possibilities, heads or tails. So this is a tree diagram where we flip the coin twice. We branch off the initial event, flipping the coin the first time with a heads or tail, and then we branch off each of those events when we flip the coin a second time with heads or tails. So when you flip a coin twice, a possible outcome could be to get heads on the first and then heads on the second. Another outcome could be get heads on the first and tails on the second. A third outcome could be get tails on the first and heads on second. And the last possible outcome could be get a tails on the first and tails on the second. So this is how we express it in the outcomes column. HH for heads on the first, heads on the second. HT for heads on first, tails on second. TH for tails on first, heads on second. And TT, tails on first, tails on second. So you can see when you have more events as part of your experiment, so two events in flipping the coin, flip the coin once and flip it again. The more events, the more branches from the tree diagram, and then the more outcomes we see in this last column. And there is a relationship between the number of outcomes that appear and the number of events. Since we flip the coin once here, and flipping a coin only generates two outcomes, heads or tails, since we flip the coin once, we only have two raised to the first power, which is two possible outcomes. Here, when we flip the coin twice, we have 2 raised to the second power. 2 to the second is 4, and so we have 1, 2, 3, 4 outcomes. We flip the coin a third time, we would have 2 to the third, or 8, and there would be 8 outcomes in the last column. We can answer more complex probability questions with the help of a tree diagram. So for example, if a fair coin is flipped twice, which means that we're going to be looking at that tree diagram where we had 4 outcomes, what's the probability of getting 2 tails? Okay, so we look at our tree diagram when we flip the coin twice. The probability of getting 2 tails is basically found by that same concept of probability. In the numerator, you put the number of ways you can get 2 tails, and in the denominator, you're going to put the total number of possible outcomes. Well, the denominator is easy because we'll look at the column for outcomes and we can see that we immediately have 4 possible outcomes. So the denominator is 4. The probability of getting 2 tails, well, we'll have to count how many of these outcomes have exactly 2 tails. Well, it's just this last one here. This TT is the 2 tails. There's only one way to get 2 tails, so our probability is therefore 1 over 4, 1 out of 4, which is 0.25 as a decimal or 25% as a percent. On WebWork, you will be asked whether or not to give your probabilities as a fraction, as a decimal, or as a percent. So if there's ever any ambiguity, you should read the directions and you'll probably see your how you should give your answer in the directions. Okay, answering a different question, if a fair coin is flipped twice, so again, looking at the same tree diagram, which is for flipping a fair coin twice, what's the probability of getting at least 1 tail? Well, at least 1 tail, at least 1 means 1 or more tail. So we look at the outcomes and we see we have 4 outcomes, so our denominator again is 4, but if we pick out the outcomes that have at least 1 tail, there's 1, 2, 3 of them. 3 of the outcomes have at least 1 tail or 1 T. So 3 over 4, which is 0.75 or 75%, is the probability of getting at least 1 tail when you flip the coin twice.